Now, The Sinner Season 2. Firstly, I want to give a warning, the preface. There's going to be a lot of spoilers because I'm going to talk about the entire second season, and there's also a trigger warning because the second season is 17 plus. It has themes of rape and sexual abuse and sexual harassment. So I just kind of want to put that out there first before starting the whole entire video. Now, moving on. Firstly, it had a lot to live up to. The expectations placed comparing the first season to now were very high because Jessica Biel did a wonderful job. She actually received a Golden Globe nomination because of her performance, and the show itself received a nomination for Best TV or Limited Series. Now the story starts out with the young boy and his parents who he poisons without no explanation. A returning character is the same detective who handled Cora's case, who is Detective Ambrose. Just like in the last one, he's distant, cold, and a bit distracted, but he clings onto Julian just like he did with Cora, believing there's more to the story than just an average murder. During the show, they present two timelines, the past and present, and they interconnect these two timelines, giving context and reason as to why certain characters act the way they do. We initially meet Detective Heather, who is the one who calls Ambrose when she starts to unravel the oddness of the case, as well as Alicia Henning, who is Julian, also known as the killer. He immediately confesses in the murder, seeming a bit lost and retreated with difficulty to speak clearly. It's evident that he is in shock considering what he had just witnessed. Out of nowhere, Julian's actual mom pops out. I know. Vera, who is played by Carrie Coon, a little bit of tidbit. The whole entire season, I was like, I know this woman. I know that face. Where have I seen that face? I mean, it was like eating me alive, and I was like, where have I seen that? And I was just like, where? And when they showed her with the longer hair and like the past, I was like, I know her. And then it finally clicked. And then I Googled her, and I was like, she's the girl from Fringe, the main character. Oh my god, it was great. And I was like, hair really does a difference. Anyways, moving on. We learned that they're part of a cult. That's not a cult, but it's actually a cult. It's definitely a cult. Their way of life is quite different than society's, living retreated in the forest. They live off their own land and don't tend to have contact with the outside world. They're kind of more of a very peaceful lifestyle. We also learned that the cult used to be quite violent, filled with individuals who assaulted, sexually harassed, or abused others under the jinx of therapy. What we saw was that the leader would invite people who weren't actually members of the cult into their therapy sessions, and therapy sessions used to be talking about your trauma, and it turned into living out your trauma because apparently that worked better, but what that did was created more harm towards others. We see this in the case of Vera, who gets almost hit and harassed by another man because she is playing the part of his ex-wife. And then we see it with Bess when she has a cut on her leg, supposedly because of the rock, but it was a pretty long cut on her leg. So, Now, Vera is shown to be the one who changed the whole entire dynamic of the cult because it's heavily implied that she murdered the Beacon, aka the leader, who had also been accused of sexual abuse, because there's a scene where she goes to him apologizing and saying that she's making a tea to apologize. The same method Julian did to kill Bess and her partner. You see where I'm going with this? You see where I'm going? Anyways, throughout the series, plot twists are thrown into the mix, clearing and making you understand the bigger picture. For example, Marin, who is the birth mother of Julian. I know, more moms just pop out. And get this, after 13 years, also I'm not going to Google if I'm right or wrong about how old that kid is, because I thought he was like 8, and apparently he wasn't. He finally comes back to become Julian's mother after abandoning him. Obviously, Vera doesn't want this, and it's understandable why not, considering she has never told Julian that his birth mom wasn't actually her, because Marin left and never said if she would ever come back. Marin was willing to wreck Julian's life just to have her own satisfaction and child. This doesn't mean Vera isn't in the wrong for lying or concealing the truth from Julian, but what Marin did was also selfish and reckless. Now, Marin is a lost soul who doesn't have a good upbringing, constantly being berated by her mother and told she was better off never being born. It's one of the primary reasons why she decides to keep the baby, because she doesn't want to repeat the same rhetoric that was told to her. We aren't actually told who the father is initially, deducing that it might be the Beacon because of his history, but we later learn the actual truth, which is heartbreaking and gives perspective in regards to Heather. Now, during the whole entire back and forth, future, present, I just say future, present, I meant present, past, sorry. We are seeing how her dialogue is with Marin, always telling her that she's part of the family, that she could stay with them, to come back, to not be in the cult. and Marin telling her to grow up, to just leave her alone, that she's fine where she is. And you're just kind of surprised and you don't really understand until the revelation. Now, like I said, I'm going to give another trigger warning. Heather's father rapes Marin. The night the girls went out and got drunk, they start fighting because Heather kisses Marin, and Marin keeps implying that Heather wasn't being honest with herself because she wasn't being honest about being gay. Now, this causes Marin to upright and leave, and leaving Heather at the fire station. So Heather calls her father, and they go look for Marin, and Marin is walking down the street in the middle of the night with no cars, just completely alone. So they head back home. And obviously, Marin is telling him that she's gonna leave, that she's just going to go home, and he tells her that it's not safe for her to stay, just to go sleep at the couch. Up till now, everything's fine, and then it's just 180'd. It really caught me off guard, and they focus on her face and just seeing how shattered and how completely disgusted she is. And Heather, in an earlier scene, talks about how family was very important to Marin, and she would always come over to Heather's house to spend whatever holiday, Thanksgiving, Easter, Halloween, whatever it was, just to be with them. And to have that level of trust completely shattered by someone she possibly saw as a father figure pushed her towards the cult, where she never told Heather the truth, but we later find out she never blamed her. Now, this is relevant. This revelation is shown because Heather's father created a shell company to give monthly paychecks to Vera, who had known about the rape and blackmailed him to maintain either Julian or the cult. Now, Heather's father always talked about Marin as if she was dead and it was best to forget about her. His narrative was always dismissive, always trying to move on to the next subject. We learned that everything happened because Marin was trying to essentially kidnap Julian. Bess and her partner tried to help by taking him away without Vera knowing, but like I said, Julian ends up eavesdropping on the conversation and learns that they're lying to him. They don't actually explain why he poisons them, like the reason on why he chose poison instead of just running away or anything else, but they do explain that he was taught that when people died, they started over, making him believe that they would be okay. We get a flashback in where Vera is testing Julian on the various plants in the forest to help with headaches or whatever. Then they come across this plant that Vera tells them that it's very poisonous and that if diluted with water makes it more potent and can kill someone. Now, throughout the series, we watch Julian grow. He comes off as a scared, defenseless child, but going through so many revelations in regard to his own life, he obviously changed, and it shows the type of person he wishes to be. Now, that doesn't mean that he is very, very just trusting with everyone. For example, when Marin kidnaps him and tells him, "Oh, by the way, I'm your mom," he's just like, okay, and he just goes with her, just like that. Now, there is kind of like this light implication that he's kind of, I don't hate this word, but I'm going to use it, gifted in regards to the fact that he can tell when people are lying to him and when people are being genuine. What he was taught in the cult was to always be truthful, and so he doesn't, when people lie to him, he immediately shuts them off. And so I believe that's one of the reasons why he's so trusting, is because he sees that people are being truthful, so he's kind of like, why not? But it's still kind of, a little bit suspicious. Not suspicious, a little bit, not good. Now, he understands what he did. He understands that he needs to pay for what he did and the decisions he made. That's one of the reasons he actually comes back. Him and Vera meet up, and Vera is kind of getting them ready to move to Washington to just escape. And he tells him no, that he needs to do time, that he needs to be in jail because he did something bad. And Vera tells him, like, what, but you know that you're not going to be able to see me. We're not going to see each other. And he says that for now, maybe not, but when he's 18 and he's an adult, he will have the liberty to say that he wants to see her and that she can come and see him. Now, in the beginning, he was excited to go to Niagara Falls because he's never been outside of the cult. And the last season, he's with Heather and Ambrose, both of them surprising him by taking him to Niagara Falls, where he says, quote, "My mom would have liked this," end quote. But, like, which one? Because he only spends time and meets Marin for a day. But Heather rubs his back almost as if he was referring to Marin, so that was a little kind of, Now, the show had good plot twists and storytelling elements. Certain characters did have great character development, and others didn't. They just stayed the same throughout the whole entire course. The conclusion left you unfulfilled, in a sense, although it did tell you all you needed to know sometimes. They kind of left certain, storylines just, for example, in the cult, they had this big rock that they worshipped. And she kind of gives an explanation, past explanations. Sometimes they said that they were two lovers trapped in the rocks, or that it had a kind of like healing elements, but they kind of just left everything kind of, just like, what was it? Like, was it a magic rock? Like, what? The storyline of Heather being gay was brought up at times. Her father trying to get her to date, telling Ambrose his daughter was gay without her permission, and she later tells Ambrose Marin was only a friend, showing us that she wasn't entirely comfortable being out towards others. Now, Marin initially was pushing Heather to come out of the closet, but it didn't really go anywhere either. Now, this storyline doesn't necessarily need a happy ending, but it just felt placed in the air with no resolution. Ambrose and Julian became almost like a father and son, but Ambrose is still a bit distant, not completely letting his guard down. Vera tells him that even if he saves Julian, it doesn't mean he will save himself. I believe Ambrose identifies with these lost souls, such as are the cases of Cora and Julian, because he sees what he could have become. We learn he burned his own house down to get rid of his mother, and he hated her, and apparently she hated him as well. I watched the entire show in a day, and I didn't feel anything profound. Usually when you watch shows, even watching the first season of The Sinner, it left you on edge, heartstrings being tugged, because you felt empathetic, and you were constantly wondering and making up possible scenarios. When it ended, you felt for the character and everything she had gone through. With Julian, it isn't. You felt more empathetic towards Marin or Vera because they show how they lived in the cult and their upbringing. I feel like if they had focused more on the cult and its history, it would have been more interesting. Now, Julian lived a happy life. We are shown that he's very happy in the cult and he was a happy child. And yes, he does murder two individuals, and that makes things take a 180, but you don't feel the same as Cora. Now, it's inevitable to compare both seasons, even if they did have two different characters. Taking that into consideration, The Sinner Season 2 had those moments of deduction, where you felt like you were also a detective, keeping you second guessing, but the ending just fell through. You didn't necessarily get an aha moment. It wasn't a bad season, but it wasn't as great as the first one. I would recommend the second season, but when you have time or you're bored, I would recommend watching the first one again, because I think the problem, like I said, is that it had a lot of expectations. The first one did very well. It was a really great show. I think the first season set a standard, a very high standard, that I felt like the second season just didn't really reach it. And I feel like if the second season had been the first one, it would have been different, but it wasn't. My final thoughts would be, this isn't necessarily a bad season. It just had a lot to go up against. And obviously, season 1 was this very huge success, and season 2, it would be very difficult for it to reach the same standard that the season 1 did. Now, like I said, that doesn't mean that it's a bad season. It just wasn't what season 1 was. So, if you were like me and you binged the entire show in one day, what did you think about it? Tell me below, because I love talking about this show. And since it's only been like a day or two, I don't even remember. Time doesn't exist for me. There's not a lot of people talking about it yet, so.